My dear friends, greetings. Who doesn't know the most famous ocean liner in history, the Titanic? If the ship really strikes a chord, it's obviously because of its sinking, which took place during the night of April 14th to 15th, 1912, and which caused more than 1,500 deaths, men, women, and children, in particular the passengers of the third class, who had the most difficulties in reaching the lifeboats. But here we are in 2017. We thought we found a trace of one of the victims of the tragedy. Mathilde Lefebvre was 12 years old when she left Liévin in the Pas-de-Calais. The Lefebvre are part of these northern mining families who moved to the United States to meet the labor needs in the mines of Iowa. With her mother Marie and her three brothers and sisters, Jeanne, Henri, and Ida, Mathilde is no doubt looking forward to going to meet her father and two older brothers who have already been working there for a year. The mother and her little ones traveled to Southampton in England, and there they board the Titanic with two modest third-class tickets. But the sinking of the Titanic takes Marie and her four children. Their bodies will never be found. In 2017, however, Canadian walkers made a strange discovery at Hopewell Rocks in the Bay of Fundy. A bottle lies on the beach, sealed with wax, but it is transparent, and you can see right away that it contains two small rolls of paper. Very quickly, they open the providential package, and there is the astonishment.
April 13th, 1912. I throw this bottle into the sea in the middle of the Atlantic. We must arrive in New York in a few days. If anyone finds it, please let the Lefebvre family in Liévin know. Mathilde Lefebvre.
So did we find an authentic testimony from Mathilde? That would be a stroke of luck. She would have written and sent her message on the 13th, the day before the shipwreck. Immediately an investigation begins with, of course, historians and all sorts of specialists, including a psychometrician who is in charge of analyzing the letter, Coraline Hausenblas. And here I'm going to do something a little unusual, a small parenthesis, because it is the occasion to recall the multitude of professions and specialties which take part in historical research. In history, the analysis of written documents is, for example, very important. So much so that since the beginning of the 17th century, many disciplines have tackled it, such as the philosopher Camillo Baldi, who proposed in 1622 to associate a writing with a personality. The problem is that since then, we have sometimes sunk into pseudoscience, or even downright esotericism. Fortunately, the modern study of psychomotricity allows us to put all that aside and provide an analysis that is rigorous, an ideal setting for our little investigation. As this video is coming out, Coraline Hausenblas has just published her results, and as she is one of our subscribers, she kindly offered to tell you about it. So it's a nice exclusive. Thanks to her, I place her complete analysis in the description. The question that is asked is rather simple. Could the letter attributed to Mathilde Lefebvre have been written by a 12-year-old girl, April 13th, 1912? In April-May 2021, the famous letter resurfaced in the French and Quebec press. Numerous articles relate the work of a team of Canadian researchers who try to pierce its secret. Doubts as to its authenticity are quite high, but can we prove that it is a fake? At this point, Coraline enters the scene, who has the advantage of being specialized in the psychomotor development of writing in humans, but also who is passionate about history and was born in Lille, thus originating from the same region as little Mathilde. And the recourse to online written resources, in particular Titanic Encyclopedia, does the rest. So the analysis is as much about the writing itself as it is about its history, because indeed, there is no ready-made technique in this kind of work. The act of writing is quite global. It involves the whole body, cognition, emotional states, and context. So we're going to analyze from the smallest to the largest, starting with 160 letters divided into 31 words that form 3 sentences. And here, it gets stuck very quickly. Just in terms of letters, in fact, in the early 20th century, the teaching of writing in French schools is based exclusively on attached cursive writing. Cursive letters have a small final tail that allows them to be linked together with the same word. Conversely, the script separates each letter. And then there's also personal writing. Sometimes people write this or that letter in a slightly original way, or even in a weird way. In theory, a schoolgirl of the time writes 100% in cursive. But here, only 64% of the letters are in cursive, 24% in script, and 12% in personal. It's nothing to do with the standard of the time. On the other hand, this happy mix is a bit atypical of a rather adult 21st century writing style. The cursive writing, it is clearly not natural, and besides, the little linking loop between the letters has a funny behavior. When it is drawn, it is sometimes useful and sometimes not. On the other hand, sometimes it is forgotten when it would be very useful. If we now analyze the words, the feeling of uneasiness grows a bit. The letter is full of spatial and temporal markers, like the sea, the middle, the Atlantic, New York, Liévin, April 13, 1912. We should arrive in a few days. In addition, the author uses very vague words, in the middle, someone. Even the I at the beginning finally becomes a we that is rather indistinct. Who's we? Is it Mathilde's family? Is it all the passengers? We don't really know. With this type of vocabulary, the sender of the letter doesn't make sure that their message is well understood. Because this catch-all, it seems to make sense. But in reality, it is vague enough that each reader can project their own interpretation onto it. With these kinds of words, it's up to the reader to make sense of what's being said. And that's a pretty classic manipulation technique that immediately raises suspicion. And then we come to the structure of the sentences. What is Mathilde telling us? What does this 12-year-old girl who writes from a boat want? Does she want to pass the time, to have fun, to say hello to a complete stranger through space and time? Here again, it doesn't fit. The letters, which are very narrow at the beginning, become quite disproportionate towards the end, and there are fewer and fewer characters per line. In fact, the author tries to maintain a very straight margin. They finally stage their writing. We are very far from a young girl having fun. Besides, the subject is quite imperative. She says, warn the Lefebvre family in Liévin? Warn them. But warn them of what? Since the shipwreck hasn't started. Mathilde could have said, greet or contact. Here, clearly there is an anachronism since the author of the letter seems to predict the drama. And why refer to the Lefebvre family of Liévin since the family is leaving France to go to the Americas? Unless the author has only half the story, because they would have simply been inspired by the commemorative plaque of Liévin, which was made in 2002. There are still 1,000 other details. The wax sealing the bottle, the thickness of the line, the absence of ink paste, the quality of the paper, all this represents 140 hours of work to analyze this tiny text for a conclusion that is almost without appeal. The letter is a fake document of modern origin. There are two things I take away from this case. First of all, creating a forgery is a real acting job. In fact, you have to forget yourself, take on a role for a while, and then become yourself again. And that's extremely difficult. In this kind of investigation, one could imagine that in a very long text, there's an expert who will detect the fault that betrays everything, and that brings the whole house of cards down. But actually right now, in 3 poor 8-line sentences, the betrayals, there are dozens of them. Almost every other letter is screwed up. So it's kind of funny, but not that funny. Because in the end, the identity thief lacks a lot of ethics. First of all, he's going to steal the identity of a dead child who's no longer here to express herself, which is pretty ugly. But their final goal is to play on our emotional levers, even if it means confusing possible Lefebvre descendants. And for that, they're ready to manipulate us. That is to say, to use our own cognitive biases against us, as when we spontaneously want to give a meaning to what is vague. So why am I telling you all this? Well, because in history, as in any science, you always have to question your ability to accept and believe information. You have to try to remain neutral. Maybe not absolutely without emotions, we're not robots, but at least without implementing your interpretation in what you read. I don't hide from you that it's a struggle that's quite difficult, that is daily, but it's clearly necessary to avoid being manipulated. Thanks again to Coraline for sharing her field experience with us. I hope you enjoyed this brief expedition into the heart of research. Thank you all for watching this episode. And for those of you who have just tuned in from the main channel, subscribe to Nota Bonus, which offers additional content that allows you to explore an anecdote, a little-known fact, or even the latest research news. See you soon for a new video. Bye.